The heir to Park Global Holdings convulsed on the marble floor of his penthouse, blood trickling from his nose as thallium coursed through his veins. Dante Park's last conscious thought before darkness claimed him was brutally simple: one of them did this. Family. When he woke 3 months later in a sterile hospital room, his legs were dead weight, his body transformed into a prison of flesh and bone. But his mind had sharpened into something far more dangerous than it had ever been before. The dragon tattoo that coiled from his shoulder blade down his paralyzed arm seemed to pulse with dark promise, a reminder of the power he once wielded in Seoul's shadows, back when he could stand on his own 2 feet and make grown men weep with a single look. 2 years crawled by like centuries. Dante rebuilt himself from his wheelchair, turning his body into a weapon through brutal training, his upper body sculpted into iron while his useless legs mocked him daily. He learned patience. He learned to smile while plotting revenge. And when his mother, the Ice Queen Madame Choi, suggested a strategic marriage to save the company's hemorrhaging stocks and provide cover for his investigation, he agreed without hesitation. What he didn't expect was her. Kendra Hayes stood in the arrivals terminal at Incheon Airport, her dark skin glowing under fluorescent lights, her natural hair pulled into an elegant crown of braids, and her eyes holding the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying the world on shoulders too young to bear such weight. She was 28 years old and drowning in debts she didn't create, watching her mother die in a New York hospital while her alcoholic father gambled away what little remained of their dignity. The envelope that arrived 1 week ago sat heavy in her designer handbag, the one luxury item she refused to sell even when the eviction notices piled up like autumn leaves. Inside that envelope was a contract that read like a devil's bargain written in legalese and sealed with blood money. Marriage to a man she'd never met. 1 year of her life in exchange for $10 million, her mother's treatment fully covered, and her family's debts erased like chalk in rain. The catch? She'd be Mrs. Dante Park, wife to a wheelchair-bound billionaire heir who, according to her frantic internet research on the 14-hour flight, had connections to Seoul's underground that made her stomach twist with fear. The tattoos visible in older photographs told stories she didn't want to read. The rumors spoke of a man who'd built an empire on broken promises and buried enemies. But here she stood anyway, because desperation made cowards of them all. The driver who collected her was a mountain of scar tissue and silence called Kwon, and he drove her to the Park estate without speaking a single word. The compound rose from Seoul's landscape like something out of a fairy tale written by someone who believed in monsters instead of magic. Glass and steel twisted into architecture that screamed wealth, surrounded by walls that whispered secrets, all of it perched on a hill overlooking the city like a predator surveying its hunting ground. Dante waited in the great room, positioned by floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Seoul's skyline behind him like a portrait of power. The man was devastating in person, all sharp cheekbones and obsidian eyes that tracked her movement with predatory focus. He wore a black silk shirt that did nothing to hide the ink crawling up his neck, disappearing into his collar, promising more secrets written on skin she couldn't see. His hands rested on the wheels of his chair with casual grace, but she noticed the strength in those fingers, the way they could probably snap bone as easily as they'd turn pages. Miss Hayes. His voice was smoke and whiskey, his English perfect but edged with an accent that made her name sound dangerous, intimate, like a threat wrapped in silk. Welcome to your new prison. I hope you find the accommodations comfortable enough for the next 12 months of your life. His younger sister Myra stood by the windows, beautiful in the way poisonous flowers were beautiful, all delicate features and venom underneath. She looked Kendra up and down with barely concealed disgust. An American? This is who you chose to save us, Oppa. Ha! I chose someone desperate enough to sign without asking too many questions. Dante's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Tell me, Kendra, did you read the fine print? Or were you too busy calculating how you'd spend your blood money? Kendra lifted her chin, refusing to let him see the fear that made her pulse hammer against her throat. Every single word, Mr. Park. Including the clause about discretion and the one about maintaining appearances in public. I also noticed the section about your business interests that mysteriously don't appear in any legitimate corporate filings. So unless you want me to accidentally mention those to the wrong people, I suggest we both practice the respect this contract promises. The room went silent enough to hear Seoul's traffic through the bulletproof glass. Then Dante laughed, a sound that felt like intimacy and violence wrapped together, and something flickered in those dark eyes that might have been approval or might have been the first spark of something far more dangerous. "I'm going to enjoy this year, little bird," he said, rolling his wheelchair closer until she could smell his cologne, all cedar and smoke and something darker underneath. "Either I'll break you, or you'll break me first. Either way, it should be entertaining." 3 days later, she married him in a ceremony of ice and orchids, 500 guests who looked at her like she was a circus act, the exotic American bride bought and paid for like livestock. Madame Choi wore white to her son's wedding, a deliberate insult that made the other guests whisper behind designer fans. But when Dante slid the platinum band onto Kendra's finger, his tattooed hand gripping hers with surprising gentleness, electricity arced between them like lightning seeking ground. His thumb found her racing pulse and pressed, just a little, just enough. "Scared, wife," he murmured, close enough that his breath ghosted across her ear, making her shiver. "Terrified," she admitted, because lying seemed pointless when her body betrayed every secret. "Of you or for you, I haven't decided yet." Something shifted in his expression, gone too fast to name. "Smart girl. Fear keeps you alive in this family." That night, in separate wings of their shared penthouse suite, Kendra lay awake listening to Seoul's nightlife pulse beyond bulletproof windows. Through the walls, she heard Dante's voice, sharp and commanding, speaking rapid Korean that sounded like orders given to soldiers. She counted 3 different phone calls before silence finally settled like snow. She'd married into something far darker than corporate intrigue. She'd walked willingly into the dragon's den, and now the door had locked behind her. Morning came with Kwon driving her to Park Global headquarters, where her new role as creative director of the Aura consumer line waited like another trap. The office they'd prepared was gorgeous, all windows and light, but the designers who were supposed to be her team looked at her with thinly veiled hostility. By lunch, she'd overheard whispers in Korean she wasn't supposed to understand, words like gold digger and American whore and worse things that made her hands shake when she tried to sketch. But Kendra Hayes hadn't survived New York's cutthroat fashion world by being fragile. She'd built her brand from nothing, watched it burn when her ex-partner stole everything and disappeared, and still found the strength to keep breathing. These people didn't know who they were dealing with. The first board meeting was an ambush disguised as introduction. Myra had leaked Kendra's old portfolio to the executives, claiming she was plagiarizing Park Global's archives, that her designs were stolen ideas dressed up in African patterns to hide the theft. The white-haired men who controlled billions circled like sharks scenting blood in water. "Mrs. Park, these allegations of intellectual theft are quite serious," one of them said, his English crisp and cold. "We cannot have our brand associated with." "The only thing serious," Kendra interrupted, standing when every instinct screamed to run, "is how threatened you all are by a black woman with actual talent in a company that hasn't had an original idea in 5 years. She pulled out her tablet, her hand steady even though her heart tried to claw its way out of her chest. "This is what Park Global becomes under my direction. Wearable tech that blends traditional Korean aesthetics with African textile patterns, sustainable materials with cutting-edge functionality. It's bold. It's revolutionary. It's everything your market research says your demographic wants but you're too conservative to create." The designs filled the screen behind her, each one a love letter to cultural fusion, to the beauty of East meeting West, to the future these men were too afraid to imagine. She watched their faces change, watched greed replace disgust, watched them calculate profit margins while their prejudice warred with their wallets. "Or," she continued, her voice carrying the weight of every insult she'd swallowed, every door slammed in her face, "you can keep making the same tired luxury goods until you're as irrelevant as your granddaughter's TikTok following. Your choice, gentlemen." Dante's soft applause from the doorway made everyone turn like synchronized dancers. His wheelchair glided in with Kwon behind him, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "My wife makes an excellent point," he said, his voice carrying casual menace like other men carried briefcases. "The Aura line moves forward under her complete control. Any objections will be noted and remembered. Choose wisely." No one objected. Fear was an excellent motivator. In the elevator afterward, alone in polished steel and awkward silence, Dante caught her wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to stop her from pressing the button for her floor. "That was extraordinary," he said, his eyes searching her face like he was seeing her for the first time. "Vicious and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. Where did you learn to command a room like that?" "From people who underestimated me my whole life," she said, trying to ignore the heat of his palm against her skin, the way the tiger eyes tattooed on his forearm seemed to watch her. "You build armor or you die. I chose armor. What if I told you I don't want you to wear armor around me?" His thumb traced the delicate bones of her wrist, finding her pulse again, that gesture that was becoming intimate in ways the contract never specified. "What if I asked you to be real with me, just once?" "Then I'd call you a liar," Kendra whispered, but she didn't pull away. "Because men like you don't want real. You want weapons or shields or decorations. Which one am I, Dante?" The elevator stopped. The doors opened to reveal assistants and executives waiting, their curious eyes devouring the scene. Dante released her wrist, but not before squeezing once, a promise or a threat or both. "You're the most dangerous thing that's ever happened to me," he said quietly, only for her. "And I still haven't decided if that's a good thing or if it'll be what finally kills me." She walked away before she could ask which death he meant. 3 weeks passed in a blur of design meetings and cold dinners, of learning to navigate a household that tolerated her at best and plotted against her at worst. Kendra found allies in unexpected places: Madam Choi's personal assistant who snuck her Korean language lessons, the head of security who showed her which doors to avoid, even Kwon who started teaching her basic self-defense in the estate's private gym. But sleep remained elusive, and often she found herself wandering marble halls at 3 in the morning, chasing insomnia through a house that felt more mausoleum than home. That's how she found Dante's private study unlocked, door slightly ajar like an invitation or a test. Inside, medical files covered his desk in organized chaos. Police reports marked confidential in both Korean and English. Photographs of Dante before the poisoning, standing tall and dangerous, surrounded by men whose eyes held the flat effect of professional killers. And in every image, those tattoos told stories in ink and skin: the dragon across his back, Korean characters down his ribs that probably spelled violence, symbols she didn't recognize but felt in her bones meant death and worse. Thallium poisoning. Suspected internal attempt. Primary suspects: Park Myra, cousin Park Hyun-woo, unknown insider. Looking for bedtime reading? Kendra spun, heart launching itself against her ribs. Dante filled the doorway, his wheelchair silent as death itself. In the low light of desk lamps, she could see more of the ink covering his arms, disappearing into his black silk shirt. The tiger on his forearm seemed to breathe, the dragon on his neck pulsed with his heartbeat, and she wondered how many secrets were written on skin she couldn't see. "Your sister tried to kill you," Kendra said flatly, because dancing around truth seemed pointless now. "She poisoned you, crippled you, and you brought me here to what? Use me as bait? A distraction? Another piece on your revenge chessboard? I brought you here because I needed someone with nothing to lose and everything to gain." He rolled closer, the mechanical whisper of his chair the only sound in a room thick with tension. "Someone who wouldn't be loyal to my family, who couldn't be bought by the people trying to destroy me. Someone I could trust precisely because they have every reason to hate me." "I don't hate you," Kendra said, the words escaping before wisdom could stop them. His hand shot out faster than thought, gripping her wrist with the strength of a man who'd built his body into a weapon even from a wheelchair. The dragon on his forearm flexed with the movement, scales seeming to ripple under skin. "Don't lie to me, Kendra. It's the only rule that matters between us. Lie to the board, lie to my family, lie to the whole world. But never to me." She yanked free, her skin burning where he'd touched her, nerves singing with sensation that had nothing to do with pain. "Fine. I'm terrified of you. You're clearly dangerous, probably criminal, definitely using me for something I don't fully understand yet. But I don't hate you. I pity you." He smiled, slow and predatory and absolutely devastating. "Good. Pity me. Underestimate me. Everyone does right before I destroy them. But you asked what you are to me. You're the insurance policy I never knew I needed. You're the chaos I can't predict. And if I'm being honest, which apparently is our one rule, you're the first person in 2 years who's looked at me and seen something other than a broken man in a broken chair. Who poisoned you, Dante? When I find out, he said, voice dropping to something that made her blood run cold, you'll read about it in the obituary section. Multiple obituaries, probably. If you're feeling the tension right now, wait until you see what happens when these two stop pretending they're not falling for each other. Because in this world of corporate thrones and buried secrets, one wrong move could destroy everything. And the worst part? They're both starting to realize they might actually care. Week 5 brought the charity gala, one of those glittering affairs where Seoul's elite gathered to congratulate themselves on their wealth while pretending to care about whatever cause justified the champagne. Kendra wore a gown she designed herself, deep emerald silk that made her skin glow, and she felt Dante's eyes on her all night like physical touch. He'd been distant since the study confrontation, speaking to her only when necessary, but his gaze followed her through the ballroom like a predator tracking prey. The attack came without warning. One moment she was accepting a champagne flute from a waiter, the next she was watching that same waiter move through the crowd with dead eyes and purpose, heading straight for Dante's exposed back. The knife appeared in his hand like magic, blade catching light, and Kendra didn't think. She grabbed her champagne bottle by the neck and swung with every ounce of strength in her body. Glass met skull with a crack that reverberated through her bones. The waiter dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The knife clattered across marble. Chaos erupted in screams and gasps. Kwon materialized from nowhere, gun suddenly in hand, face absolutely calm as he dragged the unconscious assassin away while security swarmed. But Dante only had eyes for Kendra, standing over his would-be killer in a blood-splattered designer gown, breathing hard, magnificent in her fury and fear. You saved me, he said, wonder threading through his voice like he couldn't quite believe it. Don't get used to it, Kendra snapped, but her hands shook violently now that adrenaline was crashing. I just ruined a $5,000 dress for you. You're buying me a new one. In the armored car racing back to the estate, emergency protocol in full effect, Dante caught her wrist again. This time, gentle as prayer. Why? He asked, his face inches from hers in the dim interior. You could have let him kill me. You'd be a very wealthy widow with no strings attached. Free to go home to New York with everything you wanted. Because, Kendra said, meeting those obsidian eyes that had haunted her dreams, I don't know what you are, Dante Park. Businessman, criminal, victim, villain, probably all of those things at once. But you're mine for 11 more months. And no one kills what's mine. Not on my watch. The kiss happened like lightning finding ground, sudden and violent and absolutely inevitable. His hand tangled in her carefully styled hair, pulling pins loose, dragging her into his lap with strength that belied his paralyzed legs. She tasted desperation on his tongue, felt the hard muscle of his chest beneath silk, the ink on his skin burning hot against her palms. He kissed like a man drowning and she was air, like she was the answer to questions he'd stopped asking years ago. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the partition between them and Kwon was still up. Seoul's lights blurred past like stars falling. This complicates things, Kendra whispered against his mouth, already knowing it was too late, already feeling herself fall. Everything about you complicates things, little bird. He kissed her again, softer, like he was memorizing the shape of her lips. But I think I'm starting to enjoy complications. I think I'm starting to enjoy you. They didn't speak again until they reached the estate, but his hand stayed locked with hers, and she didn't pull away. The aftermath of the assassination attempt changed everything and nothing. Security tripled. Kwon became Kendra's shadow. And the investigation revealed what Dante had suspected: the waiter was connected to a shell company owned by Myra's college roommate. The noose was tightening around his sister's neck, and she knew it. Week 7 brought the scandal. Someone had hacked Kendra's private cloud, stolen intimate photos from before Seoul, nothing explicit but private moments that weren't meant for the world. The gossip sites exploded with headlines screaming gold digger, social climber, American whore who'd trapped a disabled billionaire. Myra's social media posted carefully crafted non-denial denials that fanned the flames into inferno. Kendra locked herself in her design studio, rage and humiliation warring in her chest until she couldn't breathe. She'd faced racism before, faced skepticism and insults and doors slammed in her face, but this felt different. This was violation, intimate and cruel, designed to break her spirit before it broke her reputation. When Dante's wheelchair whispered into her studio hours later, she didn't look up from her sketches, couldn't bear to see pity or worse in his eyes. "I can make this go away," he said quietly, voice carrying the weight of promises kept and threats fulfilled. One phone call. The sites go dark, the photos disappear, and anyone who shared them learns very quickly why you don't anger the Park family. But it will cost something. What? Kendra laughed bitterly, still not looking at him. "More of my dignity. My soul. What's left to take, Dante?" He rolled closer, wheels barely making sound on the floor, until his knees nearly touched hers. The dragon tattoo peeked from his open collar, and she wanted to trace it with her fingers, wanted to map every story written on his skin and rewrite the endings. She hated herself for wanting. "The truth," he said. "Tell me why you really married me. Not the money, not your mother's treatment, not the surface reasons. The real one, the thing you haven't said out loud to anyone." She finally looked at him, eyes burning with unshed tears. "You want my trauma? Fine. My father drinks himself blind every night while my mother dies by inches in a hospital bed. I spent 5 years building a fashion house from nothing, from midnight oil and bleeding fingers and dreams too big for my bank account. Then I trusted the wrong man, a business partner who promised to love me, promised forever, then stole everything and disappeared like smoke. I married you because I'm so tired of losing, Dante. I married you because at least this way, the loss was my choice. At least this time, I knew the cage I was walking into." He pulled her into his lap without asking permission, and she went without resistance. His arms wrapped around her, strong despite everything, tattooed with violence and secrets, and for the first time since arriving in Seoul, she let herself cry. She sobbed into his shoulder while he held her, one hand stroking her hair, the other pressed against her spine like he could hold her together through sheer will. "I married you," he said against her hair, voice rough with emotion she'd never heard from him before, "because I'm dying. The thallium poisoning damaged more than my legs. My liver is failing, slowly but certainly. I have maybe 2 years left, 3 if I'm lucky and the experimental stem cell treatment works. I needed someone who would survive the aftermath, someone strong enough to burn down the empire my family built on corruption and blood. Someone who could destroy the vultures circling everything I've built." Kendra pulled back, staring at him with tears still wet on her cheeks. "You're dying. And you didn't think that was information your wife should have?" "You're not really my wife," he said, but his hands on her waist said otherwise. "You're an insurance policy. A weapon I'm pointing at my family's throat. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, the last good thing in my miserable life." She kissed him then, tasting salt from both their tears, tasting truth and lies and the complicated space between. The kiss deepened, desperate, and his hands found the zipper of her dress while her fingers mapped the ink and scars across his chest. They made love in her studio with Seoul's skyline painting them in neon and shadow, every touch a confession neither wanted to make, every kiss a vow that had nothing to do with contracts or revenge. Afterward, curled in his lap in the chair that was both throne and prison, Kendra traced the Korean characters tattooed down his ribs. "What do these say?" "Vengeance is a dish best served cold," he translated, his voice still rough from pleasure and honesty. "I got them after the poisoning, when I swore I'd destroy whoever did this to me. And these?" She touched the tiger eyes on his forearm, the ones that seemed to follow her. "Those I earned before I went legitimate. Mostly legitimate. Each one represents a business transaction that didn't go through official channels. The kind that leave bodies instead of paperwork. You're a criminal." Not a question, just acceptance of what she'd already known. "Reformed criminal," he said with a ghost of his predatory smile. "Mostly. Does it scare you?" "Everything about you scares me, Dante Park." She pressed her palm over his heart, feeling it beat steady and strong. "But I think I'm falling in love with you anyway, and that's the most terrifying thing of all." His eyes closed like she'd wounded him. "Don't. Please, Kendra. Don't love me. I can't protect you from what's coming." I can barely protect myself. Then let me protect both of us. You already did. But the worst is still ahead, little bird. And I don't know if either of us will survive it. He was right. Week 9 brought the emergency board meeting, carefully orchestrated by Myra and her faction of old guard executives who saw Kendra as a threat to everything they'd built. They had evidence, fabricated but convincing, that Kendra had embezzled funds from the Aura project. Account numbers, forged signatures, a paper trail that led straight to offshore accounts they'd created in her name. The boardroom smelled like blood in water. Myra stood at the head of the table, beautiful and venomous, playing the concerned sister with practiced perfection. Mrs. Park has betrayed this family's trust, she said, her English dripping with false regret. She's stolen from the company, used her position to line her own pockets, and made a mockery of everything Park Global represents. I motion for her immediate removal and criminal prosecution. Madam Choi, ice personified, nodded once. Seconded. Kendra stood alone at the opposite end, Dante beside her in his wheelchair. She could feel him coiled tight, ready to strike, but she placed a hand on his shoulder in silent communication. Let me handle this. Trust me. You want to destroy me? Kendra said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. Fine. Let's talk about destruction. Let's talk about the funds that disappeared from Park Global's accounts 3 months before I ever set foot in Korea. Let's talk about how those transactions trace back to a shell company owned by Myra's college roommate. Let's talk about how I have documented proof that Myra hired the man who tried to kill your son at the charity gala, the same man who's currently in police custody and very interested in a plea deal. She pulled out documents, spreading them across the table like winning cards in a deadly game. Kwon had helped her compile them, working in secret for weeks, following money trails and connecting dots that painted a picture of betrayal so deep it made the room gasp collectively. Myra's face went white, then red, then purple with rage. You lying bitch, you fabricated. Enough. Dante's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. He gripped the table, and then, while everyone watched in shocked silence, he stood. Not fully, not without his arms taking most of his weight, but enough to face them standing instead of sitting. The dragon tattoo across his back was visible through his thin shirt as muscles bunched, and Kendra realized this was the first time most of them had seen him even attempt to stand in 2 years. My wife is innocent, he said, voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. My sister is a traitor who tried to murder me and when that failed, tried to destroy the one person I trust. Anyone who votes to support Myra will find themselves explaining their decision to the authorities. Or to me personally, and I promise that conversation will be far less pleasant. Choose wisely, gentlemen. The vote was unanimous against Myra. Security escorted her out screaming threats and promises of revenge, her perfect mask finally shattered. But as they left the boardroom, Dante collapsed, pain etching deep lines in his face. The effort of standing had cost him more than Kendra realized. You shouldn't have done that, she whispered, helping him back into the wheelchair, her hands gentle despite her racing heart. I'd stand for you, he said through gritted teeth, gripping her hand like a lifeline. I'd burn the world down for you, Kendra. Don't you understand that yet? I'm starting to. She kissed his forehead, tasting salt from pain sweat. I'm starting to understand a lot of things. But understanding came too late. 3 days later, Dante's medication was poisoned. Kendra caught it purely by accident, noticing the pills were slightly different in color, the smell wrong in ways she couldn't articulate. She knocked them from his hand seconds before he would have swallowed death itself. Tests confirmed a lethal dose of the same thallium that had crippled him before. Myra, out on bail through family connections and expensive lawyers, had one last play. This ends tonight, Dante said, cold fury making him terrifying in ways Kendra had never seen. I'm done playing defense. I'm done being the victim. What are you going to do? Kendra asked, though she already knew from the look in his eyes, from the way his tattooed hands clenched into fists. What I should have done 2 years ago. Myra goes to prison, permanently this time. No bail, no family lawyers, no second chances. He made a phone call, speaking rapid Korean that sounded like orders given to executioners. But that night, Kendra woke to Dante screaming. She ran to his room to find him convulsing in bed, trapped in nightmares that replayed his poisoning in vivid detail. She held him until dawn broke over Seoul, this powerful, terrifying man shaking in her arms like a child, and she realized the poison had broken something in him that went deeper than paralyzed legs. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered when the nightmares finally released him. "I can't keep risking you. If something happens to you because of my family, because of my choices, I'll never forgive myself." "Then we leave," Kendra said suddenly, the idea crystallizing as she spoke. "I have money from the Aura line now. You have resources everywhere. We disappear, start over somewhere they can't find us. Run away." He looked at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. "Choose life. Choose us." She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Unless this was always just business to you. Unless I was always just another piece on your chessboard." He kissed her, hard and desperate and absolutely honest. "It stopped being business the moment you walked into my life wearing courage like armor. But I can't run, Kendra. If I run, they win. If I let fear drive me away from everything I've built, everyone I've buried dies for nothing. Then I'll stay and fight beside you." But 3 days later, when the doctor confirmed what she'd suspected, everything changed. The pregnancy test was positive. She was carrying Dante's child, and suddenly the stakes weren't just about revenge or survival or love. Suddenly there was an innocent life to protect, a future to consider beyond the next assassination attempt. She told him that night, watching his face transform through shock and wonder and finally, heartbreaking resignation. "You have to go," he said, his voice hollow as he handed her a plane ticket he'd somehow already arranged. "Back to New York. The contract is void. You're free, you're rich, and you're safe. That's all that matters now." "I'm pregnant with your child," Kendra said again, as if he hadn't heard. "And you're sending me away. Because you're pregnant." His hands shook on the wheelchair armrests. "Don't you see? They'll use you, use the baby, use anything they can to get to me. I can't protect you here. I can barely protect myself. You coward." She'd never been so angry, so hurt, so absolutely devastated. "You fought for your company, for your revenge, for everything except this. Except us. I'm dying, Kendra. What kind of father can I be? What kind of husband?" His voice cracked on the words. "I'm poisoned, paralyzed, and hunted by my own family. You deserve better. Our child deserves better than a father who'll be dead before their second birthday. Our child deserves a father who fights," she said, tears streaming down her face. "And I deserve a husband brave enough to let me stand beside him instead of pushing me away to protect me like I'm some fragile thing that'll break. But you're right about one thing. I deserve better than a man too afraid to let himself be loved." She threw the plane ticket in his face and walked away, leaving him in that cold, empty room with only his revenge and his pain for company. Kendra left Seoul the next morning, carrying his child and a heart broken beyond repair. 3 months passed in New York like a dream painted in grey. Her fashion house thrived on the success of the Aura line. Her mother's treatment worked, sending cancer into remission. Her pregnancy progressed beautifully, belly growing with new life. By all measurable standards, she'd won everything she'd signed that contract to achieve. So why did victory taste like ashes? The knock on her studio door came at midnight on a Tuesday, and she opened it ready to tell whoever it was to come back tomorrow. Instead, she found Dante standing there. Actually standing, no wheelchair, no support, just him on his own 2 feet looking at her like she was water in the desert. "The stem cell treatment worked," he said simply. "I can walk. I might actually live past 40. And I came 3,000 miles to tell you that I'm a fool who almost lost everything that matters because I was too scared to believe I deserved happiness. You can't just show up here after 3 months. I love you, Kendra Hayes Park." The words tumbled out like he'd been holding them back for lifetimes. "I love you with everything I am, everything I was, everything I might become if you give me the chance. I love you enough to let you go if that's what you want, if you've found peace without me. But I flew across the world to beg you for another chance. To ask you to marry me again, for real this time, forever this time." He dropped to his knees in front of her, Those knees that had been dead weight for 2 years, and she felt something crack open in her chest where she'd tried to brick up her heart. "You're still dying," she said, hating how her voice shook. "Just slower now. We're all dying, little bird. I want to spend whatever time I have loving you, raising our child together, building something real out of the ashes of what we pretended to be. You're still dangerous. Then protect me from myself. You're the only one who ever could. You're still impossible. Then say yes to the impossible. Say yes to me. Please." Kendra pulled him to his feet, to those miraculous feet that could carry him now, and kissed him like she could pour every ounce of her anger and love and hope into his mouth. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "But if you ever push me away again, if you ever try to protect me by breaking my heart, I swear I'll poison you myself." He laughed, the sound young and free and full of possibility. "Deal. Totally worth it." 6 months later, they married again in a small chapel in New York with only the people who mattered present. Kendra's mother, recovered and radiant. Kwon, stoic as ever but with something that might have been a smile. Even Madame Choi attended, thawed somewhat by the prospect of a grandchild and her son's recovery. This time, when Dante walked Kendra down the aisle before taking his place at the altar, tears flowed freely from everyone watching. This time, she wore a dress she designed herself, white silk embroidered with gold dragons and traditional African patterns woven together, East and West unified in fabric and love. This time, when he slipped the ring on her finger, his hand steady and strong and free of tremors, he added his own vow: "I promise to stand with you, to walk beside you, to fall and rise with you. To be the father our daughter deserves and the man you always saw in me even when I couldn't see it myself. Through venom and violence, through pain and rebirth, I choose you. I choose us. Forever." She touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw, the curve of his neck where the dragon's head emerged from his collar. "I promise to fight beside you, to create with you, to build the life and empire we both deserve. To raise our daughter to be fierce and kind, strong and gentle. And to remind you every single day that you are loved, scars and ink and all. Forever." Their daughter, Diana Hayes Park, was born 3 weeks later at 3:47 in the morning, screaming her arrival like the warrior princess she was destined to become. And in a New York hospital room overlooking the city that never sleeps, surrounded by family both blood and chosen, Dante Park held his daughter and his wife and thought, This is what I survived for. What I fought for. What I was broken and remade for. What are you thinking?" Kendra asked, exhausted and absolutely radiant. He kissed her temple, then their daughter's head with its crown of dark curls already evident. "That venom made me stronger. That death taught me how to live. And that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so beautiful they can never touch it." Outside, news reports confirmed Myra's conviction, 15 years for attempted murder and corporate espionage. Park Global's restructuring under joint CEOs was making headlines for its innovative approach and sustainable practices. The Aura line had become the company's most successful product launch in a decade. Inside that hospital room, none of the business mattered. Only this: love, born from darkness and desperation. A family, forged in fire and reborn in hope. And a future, written not in contracts or revenge, but in the simple, profound choice to keep choosing each other, every single day. Because sometimes the best stories aren't about how we fall. They're about how we rise, together, from the ashes of who we thought we had to be into the truth of who we choose to become. And for Kendra and Dante Park, that truth looked like a sleeping baby, clasped hands, and forever stretching out before them like an invitation to something better than either of them had dared to dream. That's how their story ends. Or maybe, it's just how it begins.